It was supposed to be just another cold winter morning in New York City, until a barefoot beggar boy stood in front of the richest man in the district, looked him dead in the eyes, and said words that froze him to his core. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again. And if you think you've heard every miracle story out there, trust me, you haven't heard this one. Stay right here. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss stories that will shake your heart, and let me take you into a tale that proves hope can come from the unlikeliest places." The morning rush in the Upper East Side was always the same, polished shoes hitting the pavement in rhythm, taxi horns blaring, steam rising from manhole covers like the city itself was breathing. Robert Kensington, a self-made billionaire, who had risen from nothing but now dressed in $1,000 suits, was stepping out of his sleek black town car, his mind already swimming with numbers, contracts, and meetings that could make or break empires. What he didn't notice, at first, was the boy. Nobody did. The boy couldn't have been older than 13, maybe 14. His frame painfully thin under a tattered gray hoodie, his jeans so worn they were almost white at the knees, his sneakers split at the sides. He stood near the marble steps of the Kensington Tower, shivering. Not from the cold alone, but from something heavier, something in his eyes that carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. Most passers-by didn't even glance at him, and those who did quickly looked away, as if afraid poverty might be contagious. But the boy didn't beg in the usual way. He didn't hold out a paper cup or mumble for change. He just watched Robert, in particular, with an intensity that made it impossible for fate not to intervene. Robert's life had been consumed by one shadow. His only daughter, Emily, had been in a wheelchair for the past 4 years. A car accident had crushed her spine, and every doctor, every specialist, every so-called miracle worker had failed to restore her ability to walk. Robert had paid millions, flown her to clinics in Switzerland, Japan, even a private rehabilitation facility in Dubai. All of them ended the same way: a soft shake of the head, a sympathetic tone, and a final, "I'm sorry." So when Robert noticed the boy finally stepped forward into his path, blocking him, his first instinct was irritation. "Move, kid," Robert said sharply, his deep voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. But the boy didn't move. Instead, he looked straight into Robert's eyes and said, "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." Robert froze, the words slicing through the armor of his skepticism. He studied the boy's face for signs of mockery, for the sly grin of a street hustler trying to run a scam, but there was none, only a strange, unshakable certainty. Robert's first reaction was to laugh, short, cold, and bitter. "Kid, do you have any idea how many people have told me that?" he said, his hand already reaching for his phone to call security. But the boy didn't flinch. "None of them were me," he said simply. And that was the first twist of the knife in Robert's doubt. Something about the way he said it made Robert hesitate. There was no bravado, no false sales pitch. "Truth, what's your name?" Robert asked, surprising even himself. "Eli," the boy replied. "Eli who?" "Just Eli," he said, as if the name was enough. Robert's driver shifted uncomfortably, but Robert waved him off. Against every rational bone in his body, he agreed to hear the boy out. Over coffee in a small cafe 3 blocks away, Eli told him a story that sounded like it belonged in a movie. He had been living on the streets for almost 2 years, ever since his mother had died, and his father, an herbalist and healer from a small African village, had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. But before he vanished, his father had passed down something to Eli, not just knowledge, but an ability. "My father could fix what no one else could," Eli said. "Not magic, not tricks, something older, something the world forgot." Robert sipped his coffee and studied him, torn between dismissing the boy as delusional and admitting he believed him just a little. Eli's eyes didn't waver. "Bring me to your daughter," he said. "If I can't help her, I'll disappear, and you'll never see me again." Robert knew it was absurd, but something, call it desperation, call it hope, call it insanity, made him say yes. Back at the Kensington estate, Emily sat in her wheelchair by the window, reading. She was pale, fragile-looking, but her eyes still had sparks of the girl who used to run across tennis courts and dance in the living room. When Eli entered, she looked up in surprise, then curiosity. "Who's this?" she asked. Robert hesitated, then said, "Someone who says he can help you." Emily's eyebrows rose, a mix of hope and wariness. "Everyone says that." "I'm not everyone," Eli replied softly. Over the next hour, what happened in that sunlit room was something Robert couldn't explain. The Nan still couldn't. Years later, Eli placed his hands gently on Emily's knees, whispered words in a language Robert didn't recognize, and told her to focus on the feeling in her toes. Emily shook her head, ready to dismiss it like every failed attempt before, till her eyes went wide. "Dad," she whispered, I can feel something." The change didn't happen instantly. It wasn't like the movies where the character jumps up and runs. But something had shifted, undeniably. Over the next days, under Eli's quiet, methodical guidance, Emily regained sensations she hadn't felt in years. By the second week, she could twitch her toes. By the third, she could lift her legs an inch. By the sixth, she took her first trembling steps across the living room. Robert watched with tears in his eyes, unable to comprehend how a boy from the streets had done what world-class surgeons couldn't. He wanted to give Eli the world, a home, money, education, but when he offered, Eli refused. "I have to keep moving," he said. "There are others who need me." That's when Robert learned the truth. Eli wasn't just a homeless boy. He was running from people who wanted his gift, people who had hunted his father and would come for him next. Robert promised to protect him, but one night, Eli vanished without a word, leaving only a note: "Don't stop believing in the impossible." Years later, Emily was walking down the aisle at her wedding, her father by her side, when she spotted a young man in the crowd, half hidden, smiling. She knew instantly it was Eli, and in that moment, she understood. Some miracles don't belong to science, or logic, or even faith alone. Some miracles walk among us, wearing tattered hoodies, carrying the power to change lives forever. And if you're lucky enough to meet one, you'll never be the same again.